This video is going to be a little bit different. I hardly ever do these types of videos. When I used to do them, I used to do them as patron-only ones for over Patreon. But this information, I think I'm just going to have to outright put it out there. Now, today is Sunday, 20 August 2023. Yesterday, Saturday the 19th, when I was going through the news to see what's been going on, I was noticing a common theme. And the theme I was noticing is that there's a new COVID variant and it's very prolific. People can catch it easy, so on and so forth. Now, I also came across some other stories other than just those scare ones. I came across a posting from a Telegram channel called Disclosed TV where someone had gone through, did searches online because of seeing these stories yesterday, and they were finding essentially the same story posted everywhere across the United States, almost word for word. But what they did is they copied and pasted the name of that county or that town or that city in there to get people scared about, hey, there's a new variant and it's already in our area. Now, I also came across a story from InfoWars. Yes, I know, Alex Jones, the king of the conspiracy theorists, take it or leave it, okay? The reason I'm mentioning it is this goes along with everything else we were seeing, or I was seeing yesterday. And I'm guessing this is from his broadcast on Friday. It was a report talking about that his people were getting contacted by people inside Border Patrol and the TSA. And these informants were extremely pissed off. And they were all essentially saying the same story. And the story that was coming out from them is they've been having closed-door meetings informing their people that there is a new version or new variant of COVID, and that by mid-September, federal agencies, federal facilities will be back to 100% mask mandate. Now, other people, I'm guessing in those same agencies a little bit higher up, have a little bit more information. And they are leaking that that is just the start. That it's going to be incremental after that for about a month. And at the end of that month time period, so about 4 to 5 weeks later, sometime in mid-October, there's going to be a hard lockdown again for everyone. Now, I posted this information over on Telegram as I was coming across it. And chat started inside the SG42 chat room on this stuff. And I pointed out that I've been hearing rumors about this since late winter, early spring of this year. That there's rumors going around that there was going to be another lockdown later this year or the beginning of 2024. They were going to use a new strain of COVID as the excuse. Well, why would be the purpose of the lockdown? No one really know for sure. That's when you had the conspiracy theories really start going crazy on it. Stuff like, to cover up problems regarding Department of Justice and certain members of the family that's currently in the White House, or maybe it's to cover up allegations of things involving kids and members of government. Possible evidence that is out there that they've been trying to clamp down on. You get the idea. It was all over the place. So I had already heard talk about this earlier this year. blew it off myself as, well, they can't get away with it because we were having these story after story, study after study coming out showing that the previous lockdown was completely ineffective and actually was the worst thing to do in that situation in the long term. That it caused harm with kids when it came to education because they missed 1 or 2 years of schooling, having to do their stuff over Skype or out of a book only with no teacher helping them out or letting them know if they got it right or wrong. The problems that masks caused, you know, it didn't actually protect against a bug, which is something I and others pointed out and we got strikes for. That dust masks, you know, cloth masks, paper masks do not protect against viruses because a virus is too small, it fits right between the weaves easily. And then some of the other bullshit things we were seeing for masks that were being recommended, it wouldn't stop a cold virus if the cold virus was the size of a frickin' bumblebee, for God's sakes. Let alone something as small as a virus. So, you know, I've been hearing chatter on this for most of the last year. You know, it kind of died down over summer until this stuff came out yesterday and Friday. So, why should we take note of this? You're probably saying that. You're probably saying that, well, they seen how unsuccessful it was last time. They're not going to do it. They're not that stupid. I'm going to point out that it's not a case of them being stupid. Maybe it's a case of them being just evil, power-hungry monsters. Okay? These are the people who still have people locked up from January 6th of 2021 in jail cells that are essentially the size of broom closets. I'm not kidding. The Daily Mail did a story on this with pictures that were snuck out to them, and they talked to that prisoner somehow. They were able to track him down and contact him, and he confirmed the conditions he's been kept in for 2.5 years without trial, and that the judge has been trying to bring him in for the trial, but the people that are holding him and transferring him around from one federal facility to another are deliberately making him miss his court dates, which means other charges are placed against him for missing his court dates, which is messed up. All this was in that article. And keep in mind, these are the same people that as we were seeing a flood come across the border, which they're not talking about, but is still going on, these same people were saying this isn't happening, as literally there's a frickin' caravan of 1,000 people walking right past them right at the border. Oh, we're not shipping them across the United States as they're being put on buses and you can hear where they're going, being put on planes, flown across the U.S. These are the same people that talk about we need to get rid of meat, stop meat consumption to fight climate change. That the wildfires aren't because of arsonists, even when arsonists are caught where the fires start, it's actually because of climate change. And because of climate change, we also have to eliminate gas-fueled vehicles as soon as possible. We have to eliminate gas stoves and gas furnaces as soon as possible for the good of the planet. You know, we've all read these stories. We all know the type of people that are in government. So is it beyond the realm of possibility they might do this? But what will a hard lockdown look like? You're probably wondering. Now, in my facility where I work, there are other military veterans. Some of them are in management, and they have been having to attend meetings over the last year. These meetings have been discussing what's going to happen if there's another pandemic and a lockdown. What has to be done to the facility? And basically, what I was told, without giving levels of details that would get them in trouble, is all trucks, all trailers, the facility, everything in the facility, every individual work area will have to be locked down hard. Security lockdown inside the building. We can lock down different areas in case of a mass shooter. Those doors are going to have to be sealed. And then all the keys for everything, the equipment, the building, and all that is going to have to be consolidated in one location so that when someone comes back, and I was told by these fellow veterans that when they were talking in a meeting, it sounds more like when someone from the government shows up to open up the facility, they can then access everywhere and anything that they want to. Take that into consideration. In the last lockdown, I'm still working for the same employer. I'm still working in logistics. In the last lockdown, because I worked in logistics, I was an essential worker. Our facility was an essential facility. And we actually got an award from our company for, not going down, not collapsing during 2020. We had some that most of the staff outright quit because they couldn't keep up with the pace, but our facility didn't. Our trucks stayed on the road, continued making deliveries. And we had trucks continuously coming in also, and they were being handled, processed as fast as possible. In some cases, setting records for all of our activities that year. And when we were made essential workers, we were given a letter from the company, and it was signed off on it by the state that if we got pulled over by law enforcement for detaining for violating quarantine, we showed them the letter showing that we're an essential worker. Here's a phone number where you can call and confirm the employee. And it had signatures from the state on there also verifying it. Well, this next lockdown, the rumors I was hearing this last spring, with a hard lockdown, the only essential workers will be government, law enforcement, military, medical personnel, and emergency services. Everybody else will be declared non-essential and be told to stay home, which means you're not going to see your big box stores open. You're not going to see the grocery store open. If you somehow were able to get past the cop patrolling your street, make it to that supermarket, it's going to be locked. It's closed up. No one's going to be there. You're not going to be able to get food. You're not going to be able to order food on Uber Eats because no one's going to be allowed to be at that restaurant to make any food to deliver to your home. Now, when we were having that conversation on this stuff earlier this year over on the conspiracy webs, the questions kept coming up is, well, how are people going to eat? Because most people only have a day, maybe two worth of food inside their home. And the chatter was, food would be distributed by local authorities and the military. Where would they get this food, people would ask. They would get it from warehouses and supermarkets, grocery stores, restaurants, wherever they could get a hold of it. Now, how conceivably could they hand out this food? This is going into the conspiracy realm for sure. But the thoughts were, they will go door to door to confirm the number of people in the home. I said confirm, not find out, confirm. Because they will be going off of existing records such as IRS filings, school records, to find out the number of people inside that home. You will then have certain guidelines that you have to follow in order to receive your food shipments. It could be something as you have to turn in your firearms, you have to turn in your ammunition, your high capacity magazines. Maybe it's you'll have to get a certain vaccination or whatever they come up with. And they won't give you that next box of food to last a week, or what they'll tell you will last a week, it'll probably last only a few days, because there's only so much out there in supermarkets and in warehouses. You'll have to prove to them that you've met the criteria to justify getting the food. So we are talking then an actual hardcore martial law without it being declared. It'll be a public health crisis. Once again, a resurgence of a virus of unspecified origins, which we will be told that there's so many people that are dying from it that we have to stay in our homes for, they swear, 2 weeks or whatever they come up with. This is something that easily they could drag out for months, as we've seen in 2020, for God's sakes. That probably was just a test run. And we're about to go into the live action phase of the exercise, or the beginning of the hardcore part of their plan. Because once people are locked up in their homes, they're easier to find and round up, aren't they? They'll be easier to find more of those J6 insurgents, or domestic violent extremists, or just general troublemakers. You know, you get the idea. Now, when we were discussing this stuff in the chat over on Telegram and the SG42 chat, there was one person in there, he couldn't wrap his head around this. He kept talking about, well, you never see viruses get more deadly. They only get more prolific, you know, easier to spread, but not deadlier, which is the same shit we were saying back in 2020. And I and at least one other person were trying to point out to him that there doesn't actually have to be an actual illness that this is tied to. All they have to do is say that there's an illness and tell you that people are dying. Remember in 2020 the daily death counts and how people literally thought 10% of the United States had died from COVID? How many actually died? It was only around 1 million. Well, 1 million is not 10% of the U.S. population. The United States does not have only 10 million people. The United States right now is around 350 million. There was not 30 million people dead in 2020 in the United States alone. But there was the perception, the fear that there was, and that's what they're going for. And I pointed out in the chats and stuff that, remember, they were talking about mandatory mass vaccinations. My job actually was taking a survey to find out who would willingly take the vaccination if it became mandatory. Those of us who would not take the mandatory vaccination would be terminated automatically once it went into effect on the deadline. Well, we did have kind of a mass uprising in our facility over that, so. But that wasn't all, and I mentioned this in the chat. Now, when the talk was that there was going to be mass mandatory vaccinations for everyone, and this was only 1.5 years ago that they were talking about this, remember? It was not that long ago. You should not have forgotten. At that time, I know there was people in my area that were just waiting for that layoff. And then they were going to go to the woods and they were going to start stacking bodies. And I mentioned this in the chat. And then there was another person saying that they didn't believe it because they seen in their area, everyone backed down, got the shot, you know, whatever. Well, I pointed out that I know for a fact that was the case because I was talking with some of them. I and a group of people, and that's all I'm going to say, there's no details. We were talking at the time that if they went through with the mandatory vaccinations, that after we were laid off, we would meet, we would go to the woods, and we would start taking lives. Now, I'm not saying that we were planning on going out and assassinate people or kidnap people. I'll clarify this. The targets that we were talking about at that time were these mandatory vax centers. We wouldn't hit them while people were there. We'd hit them when they were empty. Burn them, wreck them, whatever. Just general sabotage. We also discussed that, and I'll give an example on this. Let's say the vaccines were transported by FedEx. We learned the pattern of when the vaccines come in. We stop that FedEx truck at an advantageous location. We detain the driver, remove those shipments of vaccine from the vehicle, destroy them, then release the driver and tell him have a nice day. Now, when it would get to the point that those deliveries would be escorted, those escorts would end up becoming human compost. We also discussed, because there was talk about this 2 years ago, remember? People were sneaking the memos out of state health authorities, health state administrations and departments, talking about mandatory vaccination teams that would go door to door and forcefully vaccinate everyone in a family. So we talked about, well, how would we counter that? How could we stop those vaccination teams from going out and vaccinating people who did not want to get vaccinated, who were being forced at gunpoint to be vaccinated? That's the type of planning that we were talking about. Now, you'll probably still say that's illegal, that's insurrection. Remember what the other side was talking about at that time. They were talking about coercing us to get that vaccination, that we should lose our jobs, our bank accounts should be frozen, we should be denied being able to make purchases, children should be taken away, we should be arrested, rounded up, and put into camps. All that was stuff that was being talked about less than 2 years ago. So do you really think the conversation I and others were having at that time was not justified? We damn sure did, because we looked at it as we would be resisting a tyrannical, in-your-face police state. That's just what we planned to do back then. And I'll throw this out there for those of you that may have been part of that in the past. You know who I am, you know how to get a hold of me. Maybe we should get together again and, stop and have chats by the sides of dirt roads once again without our cell phones. Person to person. Just saying, I'd like to touch base again, see how things are going with the family and stuff. And that's where a lot of people that were thinking about this were coming from for an angle. They were thinking about their kids. Their kids being taken away from them. Their kids being forcefully vaccinated. Think about that. Now, I got some things. Combat cameraman, show me with fingers. How far are we into this video now? 42 minutes. Oh, 24 minutes. Okay. Next time, put your fingers on the right hand for numbers, just saying. All right. I wrote up a list here going off of the experiences that all of us had in 2020 and how we could potentially prepare for an upcoming hard lockdown. So Items I recommend you stock before a hard lockdown occurs. Now, really, if InfoWars is correct, starting in mid-February, we're going to see the first stages, which will lead up to a hard lockdown. Consider that your final, holy shit, this is real, I need to get serious point. But first off, as we've seen in 2020, shelf-stable foods. We're talking stuff that will require a minimum amount of preparations. Canned soups, canned pastas. And then I will also throw in there things like rice, beans, ramen noodles, the bags of rice meals, the bags of pasta meals, freeze-dried items. We all seen those evaporated right away in 2020. You know, basically by mid-March of 2020, you couldn't find a freeze-dried meal anywhere. I still had a few sources that I was getting them from, but I didn't even tell people I knew in the area where to find them. I was picking them up as I could. Something I want to point out, Augustin Farms emergency buckets. This is 48 hours of food for 4 people. You can get these at Walmart's. Go to the bulk food sections where they have the 5-pound bags of rice and also the gallon cans of food items. This is where you will find these. There's usually 2 to 4 of these on a shelf on your average store. I think they were like 20 bucks a piece or 25 bucks a piece. I'm not sure what they are currently. Get some food, stock it up, store it properly, and have it on hand. Don't touch it until you have to. We actually had the conversation on Telegram yesterday that maybe the inflation we have seen over this last year was meant to get us to use up our stored resources, the food we already had stored on hand. Next item, water and juice. We all seen how people went absolutely batshit crazy for bottled water in 2020. Get a few cases of bottled water. Maybe get 1 5-gallon water jug or a comparable for each member of your household and have it on hand. And when you see, you know, we're starting to go towards that hard lockdown, fill those jugs of water. Set them to the side. Do not touch them until the water in the tap gets turned off for whatever excuse. Juices, obviously, the vitamins from it, especially vitamin C. If you have kids, I especially recommend you have juice. If you can get a hold of the shelf-stable milk, the UDT milk, I did a video on that stuff in the past. If you can get a hold of some of that, get a hold of some, store it somewhere cool. Do not freeze it. Store it somewhere cool where nothing's going to get at it. Keep it out of the sun. I'm going to throw this in there too from personal experience. Have a few cases of soft drinks. Cans tea, cans of soda, maybe some canisters of tea mix and fruit punch and that stuff. Personal experience on this. When I was in the desert, they used to give us once a day one of these super small cans of soda like you see in the stores. The particular ones we got were either regular Coca-Cola or Sprite. They gave it to us at least once a day, typically with our evening meal. And they always made sure to get it to us. We didn't know why. We thought they were just doing it, you know, just to curb the sugar bends or whatever you want to call it, you know, coming off of the high from not having access to sugar. And my platoon sergeant, before we went into the desert, he had everyone in the platoon go to the shop it that was available to us at that time and purchase one case, a 24 can case of Coca-Cola. He kept them all inside the back of his Humvee, inside a giant wooden locked box that he built for this purpose. And then when we did not get cans of soda that day, or he would give us an additional can if we did really good that day, you know, we got a can of regular size can of Coca-Cola from him. Now, it wasn't till later, after I got back from the desert, why they were doing this. Okay, there was a huge problem with us drinking filtered water. It was causing problems of kidney stones. And the military determined the easiest way to combat this without sending someone out for surgery to get the kidney stone removed, give them a can of soda every day, or roughly a cup of really acidic juice, like a pineapple juice or cranberry juice. Cranberry juice was more common. So that's why we were given that stuff. Our platoon sergeant knew that because he was a Gulf War veteran. They apparently had, his unit had the same problem back then, and he was thinking ahead. Because remember, you're in the desert, you're drinking a lot more water than you usually do, so people were developing kidney stones rather quickly. No one in our unit did, because of forward thinking by the Gulf War I veterans in the unit. So, something to consider. It's also a great morale boost. Next up, toilet paper. We all seen the craziness on toilet paper. You can guarantee it'll be 10 times worse if we get close to a hard lockdown, and there's talk of a lockdown. I literally seen people in stores get to the point of getting ready to have fist fights, fighting over packages of toilet paper in a nearby Walmart, for God's sakes. How much toilet paper should you have? I'd say enough for at least 6 months, if not a year. Figure out how many you use per week. You can easily do that now. Keep track of how many you go through for a week, and then multiply that by 52 weeks. That toilet paper, how you store it. Get yourself a metal trash can. One of these 20-gallon, 30-gallon, or 50-gallon metal trash cans with lids. To open up the packages of toilet paper, start putting the toilet paper in there, starting on the outside edge, filling the ring, working your way inward, stuffing as many rolls in there as you can. Remember, those rolls will crush. And even when it's crushed, it will spring back so that you can use it later in your bathroom or in your improvised outhouse if there's problems. Get the toilet paper now. Go to those Costco's and Sam's Clubs. You know, if you got your cards for those types of places, try getting some of those big packs of toilet paper. Be ahead of the crowd. Don't be one of those idiots rushing to the store the day before. Next item, first aid. Now, I'm not talking chest seals. I'm not talking tourniquets. Basic first aid. Your bandages. Your medical tape, gauze pads, rolled gauze for if someone gets a little bit worse of an injury, and medications. Burn creams, because someone being stupid, burning themselves. Triple antibiotic tubes. Cold medicines, pain medicines, anti-constipation medicines, anti-diarrhea medicines, allergy meds. Wouldn't be that dumb to have some of them, because hey, you may get to a point you're going to find out you have an allergy to something you weren't aware that you did. So basic first aid items. How much? As much as you think, and add just a little bit more, okay? Don't be a hoarder. You don't need a case of multivitamins. But make sure you have enough to last that, say, 6 months. Why 6 months? Because that gets you through to next year's springtime. That's why I say that. Now, also, ammunition and spare magazines. You should already have what you need as your defensive load or your combat load. Have a few spare magazines, because guess what? You lose them, they wear out. It happens. And I will throw this out there. From what we are seeing right now going on with this White House, any ammunition, magazines, anything firearms related that you get now, pay for in cash. Do not use your card. Do not use your check. If you write a check, the way stores are set up now, there will be a number from that sale tagged to that check. They can see that check. They find out where you live. They'll see from that receipt that, hey, you bought X number of rounds of ammunition, X number of spare magazines, X number of cleaning supplies for firearms. Here's your name, here's where you live, because here we got your bank account. Pay in cash. And finally here, check your bug out bags now. I literally did last Thursday a bug out exercise with some people. Only a few of us knew the exercise was going to occur. None of us knew when it was going to occur. We knew the day, but we didn't know the time. And it was our jobs, you know, to keep people kind of prepared as best as possible. And, you know, not get drunk and all that stuff that night. When the call came that it was time for the exercise, you went through, did your bug out drill. How long you had to make it to X checkpoint and X checkpoint, X end location, that type of stuff. There was some huge problems that came up in that exercise. People forgot where they left their bug out bag. People forgot they had taken things out of their bug out bags and used it maybe when they were camping this year or last year. Maybe they took out the fishing stuff because they didn't have the money to buy new stuff before they went on a fishing trip, so they took the stuff out of their bug out bag. You know, we had stuff like that happen. Things were missing. Everyone covered down. You know, as a worst case scenario, it was still a success. Everyone showed up, not necessarily by the hit times they were supposed to, but everybody showed up, and we had sufficient items, sufficient gear, sufficient food we could pass around. But if everyone had had their shit, had made sure everything was up to date, we would have been that much faster, and we would, in theory, last that much longer if the scenario was real, longer than just the one night. We actually spent the night doing training, guard duty, and sleep rotations. And this wasn't just members of the group. This was families were supposed to be part of this also. So we had to account for little kids and all that stuff. So lots of lessons were learned. And there's a few items that I've seen appear in that exercise which I'm working on getting a hold of to do videos on. Just to give you a heads up. But go through right now, check your bug out bags. Why? Because who knows? Maybe if they go to the hard lockdown, they will start rounding people up. Well, maybe in that case, you don't want to be in your home when they come through your neighborhood. Think about that. Think about bugging out from an escape and evasion aspect. Revise your bug out plans accordingly. Revise your pre-positioned caches or items in the field accordingly. So there you go. Heads up. Just reiterate, talk about a hard lockdown sometime happening in the next 2 months here. We're going to, or supposed to see the starts of it happening here in mid-September. And I want to point out there is already news stories coming out of hospitals already going back to mandatory masking. And I've heard that there's also talks of forcing the medical staffs to update their boosters for a particular vaccination. Now, normally I can contact someone at the VA to confirm this stuff, but I cannot get a hold of my contact. When I've been trying to get a hold of them, someone else answers and is preventing me. So I cannot give a confirmation from the VA on rumors on any of that stuff currently. It has not been happening at the nearest medical facility to me, that's all I know. But the last time I was there, they were talking about there's a new COVID variant coming out and that we might have to act accordingly is what I was told. So, there you go. Things for you to ponder. Oh, and one final point out here. Some people point out how I'm obviously overweight, I'm morbidly obese. I'm actually not. This nighttime desert top is a size medium. It's actually smaller than what I need. I got this 30 years ago when these were first going on the surplus market. And at that time, a medium was large enough to go over my uniform and my equipment underneath because I was a really small guy then. I just don't feel the need to update it to the correct size I'm supposed to have now. So, for those of you that saying I'm a fat fuck, go fuck yourselves. I don't actually weigh that much. So fuck off. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot Militia movements, everybody, be careful, be prepared, and if we do go into a hard lockdown, act accordingly. Essayons.